And
see if I do a refresh here.
it'll come through on your Discord messages.
Neato.
That's that. I'll just...
Oh, I better mute it so I don't listen to myself. Yeah, I got that YouTube link. I'm just going to go post something. We can start anytime you want to.
Yeah, I'm just sorry. I'm just sending all the shit to everyone else.
No problem. Hey, Pangom.
All right.
What, you good?
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to start an intro?
Yes. I'm here with Shadow Starshine. He's on a different account, so his name's coming up as something different. But he's got interest in philosophy. He normally hangs out in a Discord server called Calliopean Club. Yeah, and we're just having a discussion about, I guess, veganism, name the trade, and maybe a bit of metaethics as well. So it's only going to go for maybe 90 minutes at all, overall. But yeah, if there's anything else you want to say, just go ahead.
No, that's pretty much me. You guys can find me on Calliopean Club if you want to debate me later. If you're not satisfied with everything said, then come out and seek me out.
Yeah, you fuck him up. If I don't do it, fuck him up. The invite for it is in the description box, obviously, and also for the Ask Yourself Discord is in the description box.
Which I am banned on. I can no longer go there.
Yeah, you got kicked.
3 times, actually.
What? That's got to be a record. Also, just for everyone, if you go into Calliopean Club, It's not quite like a lot of the other sort of politics discords where people go in and swear and is aggressive. It's usually relatively mellow as well. So if you'd prefer that, that's probably a better place than some of the other politics Discord servers.
Indeed. Do you want to start from where we left off in the YouTube discussion that we were having?
Yeah.
Oh shit, I'm not even recording. What's wrong with me? There we go.
Sure.
Good enough. All right. So what would be your summary of how that conversation was going? Because I know we could talk about like the finer points where you were asking me like, oh, do I value a live human or a dead human and those kind of things. But yep. What would you say the summary of what that conversation is about is?
Yeah, so I think that was sort of we got to a point where I think you sort of disagree with me about the sum total of differences between humans and animals, or just I'm trying to sort of I'm still sort of getting my head around your argument.
Okay.
And I asked you whether you would value a dead human and versus a live human, obviously.
Right. Well, it wasn't necessarily versus, right? It's not like I don't value one and I do value the other.
Yeah, sorry, over. Let's just say.
Ask me which one I value more.
Yeah, that's more accurate. Yeah.
You know, because in my position, if say, you know, I'm there on my grandpa's deathbed, and as soon as he, you know, takes his final breath, you know, I'm not calling over the janitor and be like, can you take this out with the rest of the trash, please? Like, this thing's literally worth nothing to me now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, I mean, if it's easy, I guess we can just ask about, we can just sort of go into the name the trait thing and just say, you know, what is the difference between animals and humans that really differentiate the two and creates a moral difference?
Well, what are differences and what are the relevant differences, I guess?
Yeah, the relevant differences. So there's obviously like going to be millions and millions of differences between one thing and another, even two humans. But the main thing is obviously the relevant differences is what we're looking at.
Right. So where I want to start on things like this is I don't think that just because you state something, that is the totality of what your morality is. When we use language to talk about morality, what we're trying to do is accurately encompass what our feelings and the way we approach things are, though often we're not successful because perhaps there's not words for it or it's just that complicated of an issue. One of the things that I relate this to is when we talk about art, right? Like if I talk about a painting that I enjoy and you say, why do you enjoy that? Like, what is it about this painting that when you see it makes you enjoy it? And that's not so easy a thing to describe, because anything I say can be broken down and shown that like that's not really the reason. There is no one the reason. For instance, if I say I like a painting Starry Night by Van Gogh, right? Well, is it because it's by Van Gogh? Well, no, I don't like everything he makes. Well, is it the sky? Well, I could see that in another painting and not like it. Like, there would be almost nothing I could say in a single sentence which would fully encompass everything of the way I look at it. The only thing that's clear to me is that when I look at the painting, I know I like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that with that, if it came down to it, you still could sort of look at it and say, I like that painting, but I don't like other types of paintings. I'm not necessarily sure if it maps out into morality, because we can still discuss it and still say, what is the difference between one versus the other, and say, what is it that we think is moral versus what it is that we find is immoral. I mean, I can say...
My point isn't that the conversation is fruitless, like that there's no point of even having it. But I'm just saying that it might not be so simple as to be like, oh, is it intelligence? Oh, is it this thing? Well, if it's a large combination of things that are hard to put into words, then expecting someone to put it into words may not be so easy.
Yeah. With that, I would still say if there is a bunch of things stacked on top of each other, you still can stack them on top of each other, and you can say these are the things that I value, and then you can still add those things. It's just a case of whether you are consistent when you refer to those as the things that you value. So generally, when we talk about why humans have moral value, it burns down for most people to consciousness. That's not necessarily the case, and obviously you can think of hypothetical, I guess people hypothetically who can have all kinds of crazy actions. Like you could have a person whose only thing of value, I guess, is just murder. If they just want infinite amounts of murder, that might be the thing that they value.
Like, I know the direction that you're trying to take it, but I don't think that there is anybody who has such simplistic understandings of it. Maybe they have simplistic ways of stating it, right? Mm-hmm. You can say sentience or consciousness or whatever is the thing that I appreciate. And maybe that even is like a large chunk of it. Or maybe it's even like that needs to be a necessary component in order for me to morally evaluate it. But to say it just boils down to it is just oversimplifying what it is that we value.
Yeah, but then once we sort of establish what it is that you value, it's just a case of whether you are consistent about it. So for me, I would say most people would have consciousness. It's not necessarily the only thing, but it's certainly, I would say, a necessary component.
Well, like I said with the dead people, like people will value that, or maybe people will value someone in a coma who has no conscious experience. It could be the case that, you know, values exist without consciousness. I would agree that when you add that component, it increases for most people. But I also wouldn't say that just having consciousness is enough for most people.
Yeah. I mean, with something like a dead person, what is it that you would value about that sort of dead body?
It would just basically be like our memory of it, like what it means to us. So in a way, you don't treat it like a piece of trash.
Yeah.
You go out and you bury it and you give it respect.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas in most people, if they catch a fish, you know, and then they gut it, they don't give it that same level of respect. It seems like this dead corpse means more to people than this live fish.
Yeah. Having said that, that might just be a case of them not applying their actual considerations, or them not having thought about what it is they find ethical, or not having thought about something, or it just could be indoctrination. But as far as
everything's indoctrination. Like I'm not going to let that change anything. Yeah, but yeah. I will agree with you. It can be the result of just not thinking about it. And I know when I listen to most people go through these vegan ethics debates, you can tell that they hadn't really even considered the question before.
Yeah. And as far as the sort of dead body thing goes, you would say that sort of intrinsically it doesn't necessarily have value. It's more of an extrinsic thing.
It depends on like what you want to define as intrinsic. For me, and you just tell me if you agree with this definition, is that an intrinsic value is applying value to oneself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, that seems about right. Yeah.
Right. Then I would agree. A dead body has no intrinsic value because it doesn't have the ability to do so.
Yeah. And then what is the extrinsic thing for consideration?
Well, that would be just anything else. So yeah, obviously we extrinsically value the dead body. And we can be so upset about this that we would say what you're doing is wrong. You know, if someone breaks into the morgue and starts necrophiliating the corpses, we would say, you know, oh, I feel this is very wrong, even though that thing doesn't have intrinsic value. I think extrinsic value we can't just discount.
Yeah. And the extrinsic value, though, like for me, if you were to say that it's based on the sort of considerations of family members or friends or loved ones, the actual extrinsic value comes from the conscious experience of those loved ones for the deceased one. So it still boils down to consciousness at that point, doesn't it?
No, I mean, not just consciousness. I mean, when you're talking about that, there comes in reasoning and all sorts of things that would allow you to get to that sort of level.
Yeah, but it would be the thing that we'd consider valuable about the deceased body is the effect that it might have on the deceased person's loved ones, or
well, we're going to talk about morality as though it's values, right? So yes, you do need a value for a value to have been infringed on.
Yeah. So at that point, I would say, so moving on from there, I guess you would say that an actual dead body doesn't have as much value as a live body.
Yeah, I would. Well, most cases. I mean, there's some people who are so vile that I would say they have less value, and I would treat them worse than a dead body.
Yeah, but that's obviously still an additional, I guess you could say, an additional condition. Like we've brought in another factor. It's an additional factor that changes it. So I'm trying to keep it sort of as
exactly. Okay, so if we're just talking about the essentials of what life is, and we add that to a dead body, I would agree that has more value.
Yeah. And then from there, would you say that animals, we talked a while ago about things like, what was it? The access consciousness versus
phenomenological.
Yeah. So for those of you, I've done a little bit of looking into it. There's a difference between access and phenomenal consciousness. So phenomenal consciousness is a higher level of consciousness. And
I wouldn't say it's higher level, but it does encompass like what it is to be something.
Yeah, so just for brevity and sort of simplicity, access consciousness is a baby has access consciousness all the way up to, I think it was 18 months, and then it becomes phenomenal consciousness after 18 months. Yeah. What would it be that I guess you would consider makes so you eat meat, I'm assuming, and you don't adhere to like a vegan lifestyle or a vegan outlook?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is it about I guess animals that you think it's okay to do what we currently do to them, and would you accept that for humans?
See, I don't think it's one of those things where it's like what makes it okay. It's what makes it not okay. It's the absence of there not being something bad about it that makes it okay to do it.
Okay, if I put it simply, would you view what we do to animals currently as okay, but if we did it to humans, you would view it as not okay?
Right.
Does it sound accurate? Okay. So what's the difference between the two that makes one okay but the other not okay?
For me, I mean, it would come down to a bunch of things. Self-awareness and the phenomenological consciousness, I think, is chief among them.
Yep. Is there anything else? So just for the sake of the argument, why don't we just stack all the ones that you can think of?
Well, I think I just give quality to humans just for being humans. Like when we talk about babies, they don't have those qualities, but still I would give them consideration simply for being a baby human. Like that's my empathetic response to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's more of a physiological reaction, but would you say it's something necessarily that should happen? So, because when people currently tend to value things that are similar to them, it's a tribalistic reaction.
Sure, it's in grouping.
Yeah, so without going too far backwards, basically, there's a good reason for racism. I'm not saying racism is good. I'm saying the main reason people tend to be...
No, I understand. You're saying it's another form of in-grouping, where speciesism is also another form of in-grouping.
Yeah, so people, there's a natural reaction to distrust things that are alien or different, and more of a biological reason to trust things that are similar to you. So people tend to trust people that have similar features to them, which results in racism, and again, racism is one of the main ones. And the same thing applies out to
sexism and those kind of things.
Yeah, so humans, we tend to value humans more than animals because there's a biological almost imperative for us to value us. but that's not to say that that is a moral thing to do. So you could.
That's not to say it's an immoral thing to do either. Like if we're gonna go, I assume we're both we're going to say that values come subjectively and that there is no ultimate authority for it.
Yeah, so I think you and I both adhere to the sort of subjective outlook. So both you and I, we discussed this privately just quickly, but
I would want to just expound upon it, because there are aspects that I would say are subjective, such as the formation of values. But where I don't get on board with the subjectivist outlook is when you think you can make should statements that aren't related to someone's values, right? So if someone says to me, you shouldn't murder this person, I'm translating that into this is how I feel about it.
Yeah,
and if you say,
I agree with that, yeah. So
right, okay,
I didn't think we need to go too far into that, because I think you and I view it exactly more or less the same. So if somebody has said to me, you shouldn't do that, and they are expressing their moral outlook on something, then I agree that they are expressing their moral outlook on something. But I'm more interested in, I guess, how you think and what it is that makes it okay for one versus the other. I think you said high levels of consciousness, self-awareness. For the sake of the argument.
Well, no, I just want to make sure it's framed correctly, is that there is a lack of things that makes it not okay. So I could have a whole list of reasons why I feel like I shouldn't do something. And it's the fact that it's just not on that list. So there's no one thing.
Yeah, I mean, but then you are making a difference between the two. And then eventually, if you say, I don't know, then it's essentially, it just gets to special pleading, doesn't it, at that point?
No, only if you say, I don't know, and I don't know is okay. I mean, if you don't know, then you're just ignorant on your own position. And I don't think that's horribly wrong, given that, this goes back to the painting discussion, where if I can't even express why I like this painting, it still doesn't invalidate the fact that I do.
Yeah, but when you're comparing sort of aesthetic preferences, I guess, versus actual moral oughts and ought nots, there is a bit of a difference, isn't there? Like you'd say there's, I guess, a higher imperative. If you make a moral judgment to infringe on the negative rights of one individual, you would say that you would have to justify that?
No. I wouldn't say because you're infringing on someone's negative rights, that's why you have to justify it. I would say that a moral value is just something of such value that when you see it, you wish it was stricken from the world. You wish that was not the case. Whereas if we're talking about preferences, I mean, that's another value I have, but when I don't get it, I'm okay with it. I understand this as being reasonable that I don't get this thing.
Yeah, I mean, with that, I guess it still sort of just gets back to the point I was saying is, if you chose for one individual to be jailed, for example, versus another, you would still say there should be, within your system, now keep in mind, I am asking for you within your system, that you would say that if someone were to be jailed versus someone else, you would say that that should be justified.
Yeah, I would want a series of things that if they were on that list, that's why they would go to jail.
Yeah, and you think that should be applied consistently?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and if that was not the case, then you would say that that would be immoral.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, and then so that just goes back to, so if we were to do to humans what we currently do to animals, so in terms of raising them for food, slaughtering them, and eating them on a day-to-day basis, right, you view that as immoral?
What, the animals or humans?
Humans.
Yeah, I would say that's immoral.
Yeah, but you wouldn't view that to be the case for animals.
Right.
Okay, and so at that point, you've already said that if you treat one differently, and you stated one is immoral but one isn't immoral, that you would need to justify it. So it gets to the point of you need to justify that.
Yeah, but you understand that I said it's because there's a lack of a reason not to do it.
What do you mean by that?
So if I have a whole bunch of things, if I say something like, I don't think anything with self-awareness should be killed and eaten for food. I don't think we should farm anything with that. If I say, I don't think we should kill or farm humans just for genetically being humans. If I say, you know, like if I give you a list of things which I care about and animals are not on that list, then it would be a consistent position to want to be able to do that to animals.
Okay. So if for the sake of the argument, we added consciousness, specifically higher level consciousness and specifically self-awareness, and then you said genetically human, which is for the most part a shell argument. And
which argument? Sorry, I cut out.
It's what's known as a shell argument. So you're saying the skin or the shell of this creature is something that you value, that you think.
We can essentially say essential properties. It's that which makes the definition of human.
But minimalistic. Human is we're obviously saying something is a human versus something that isn't a human. Right. We're saying that the fact that it is a human immediately gives it more value.
Yes.
Okay. So for the sake of the argument, if we were to have two essentially identical individuals, except one was just genetically marginally different enough so that it's not classified as a human, would you say that would immediately give it less value?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see how that might entail pro-racist connotations?
No.
Okay. If someone were to say,
all values are arbitrary. I don't see how it would.
Yeah, no, that's not that. I agree that all values that I believe, obviously values come. I say it comes from an axiomatic position, and it boils down to axiom. Like obviously, you've got the Munchausen's trilemma, so it'll boil down to axioms, circular reasoning, and infinite regression.
And also, just like I would want to know your perspective on this. Because if I told you that, like, I give this value to humans, the essential components of humans, do you think that makes me more likely to be a racist person?
No. So the thing that I'm getting to, so we can separate the two. So you can say that something makes something a human, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this thing is a human, therefore it is more valuable. So you can say that this thing genetically is a gorilla and this thing genetically is a human, but it doesn't necessarily express that you view one or the other as more morally important. And just out of curiosity, do you think there's a good moral reason for you to value humans specifically? Like, why not a triceratops?
It's just what I do. It's just a part of my makeup of what I value.
Okay. So if we had something
anytime you're going to ask me, like, what is a reason you hold a value, I'm going to tell you the same thing. They're all arbitrary. And you already agree on this point. So there's no point of asking you what my reason is.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily something that boils, like you might claim something is an axiom, but if I keep pushing, then it might be a case that it's not necessarily an axiom or an axiom that you would be willing to stick by. So for the case of the argument, if you had something, two things that were essentially identical, or close to identical, but one was genetically classified as not human and the other was genetically classified as human, you would view the thing that's a not human as immediately less valuable to you. Now, just keep in mind, I'm just going to cover any possible problems. So the human is not your mum or anything like that. I'm not going
to... No, I get the bare context way if you're asking it. And the answer is yes. Like, if I was to ask you, you're in a dilemma where you can either save a fish or a human, and everything other than the fact that one's a fish and one's a human is equal. Would you say it doesn't matter? It's just a coin toss to you?
For me, yeah. If everything was exactly the same, so if the lifespan was the same, if the conscious level was the same, if I guess the family that would be affected or whatever would be the same, I would say, yeah, it would just be a coin toss, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I have taken a poll on this before on Reddit. This is like one of the threads I made, and it's about a 50-50 split with vegans. Like, some would just say, well, in that case, I do in fact value the human more. It's not the fact that they think all things that humans should have moral value and animals don't, because obviously they set sentience as enough, like that's high enough, and then everything is within that according to them. So I understand that position, but then they also have an additional value for humans.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that like I initially thought that as well, but then the more I thought about it, I just thought it's just a pointless value.
Well, they're all pointless. So yes, it is a pointless value.
For me, within my consideration,
I would found out that you don't actually hold it.
Yeah, I like the initial reaction for me is to value the human, but then the more I thought about it, I thought, well, there's actually no reason to value the human more. And one of the other ways.
What reason were you looking for? Because that's the part I don't understand. When you sat down and you thought about it, what reason were you looking for other than the fact that you do?
Well, I mean, you could simply boil down to, I guess I could think about it in a way that, I thought, why do I view it more? And really, I thought it just boils down to the fact that I am a human.
Sure. But can you value humans even if you weren't one?
Yeah, you can value humans even if you weren't one. Okay. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I valued one over the other more. And
you just didn't like your reason that you personally held, and then you decided to abandon it.
No, because that might intuitively, I held that, but then the more I thought about it, I thought the intuition is not actually correct when I think about it. So there's certain things that intuitively you might think are that you value, but then the more you think about it, it's not necessarily the case. Because intuitively, a lot of people might even value someone of their own race over someone who isn't of their own race. But if everything is equalized, someone who does that, we literally just call them a racist.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. So the same thing, it's just a case of the circle is small for racists. So they say, well, I draw the line at my race. And I thought, well, there's actually no reason for race versus species if everything else is equalized. And the same goes for, whether you're talking about a fish or an alien or anything else for that case.
Sure. Right. But you're going to get the same problem if you look at sentience, right? If you ask yourself, why do I care about sentience? You might say something like, well, because they can suffer. And then you would ask yourself, why do I care that they can suffer? And then you would just say, I just do.
No, I agree that sentience or consciousness is an axiom, but I'm saying, why would I differentiate between one versus the other? And I would also.
So why would you differentiate between sentient and non-sentient?
That is an actual axiom.
Right? So it's just the fact that you do.
Yeah.
Right. So why are you sitting there looking at one reason as if, well, I have a problem with the reason that it led to, which was just the fact that I do. However, I hold these other values and they also boil down to the exact same thing. But you're not criticizing them.
Yeah, I'll put this in another perspective. So if you were in the position of the fish or the human, okay, let's just say if you were in the position of the fish and somebody else was choosing for you, and let's just say everything is equal.
Rose veil of ignorance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
I cannot put myself in the position of a fish. This is impossible. I wouldn't be a fish. I have to put, what you're asking for me to do in this analogy is to take my mental state and put it into a fish that could not hold my mental state. So now it's a magic fish.
Yeah, but we've already stated that everything else is equalized. So so I could say the same thing about the human.
Right? So if you want me to be the magical fish that has this intelligence, I would tell you both now the fish and the human have moral value, because that's another one of my axioms. Yeah,
so I instead of making this magical upgraded fish, we can just have a human that has the intelligence or the consciousness level of a fish, just reducing down to that level. So which one, what do you think you would value more?
The human.
Okay. So it's actually a shell value. So you value something that is that just has the right shell?
Essentially, yes.
Okay, so for the sake of the argument, if I were to torture one creature versus the other creature, and I tortured them and their suffering was the same, which body would you choose to be in?
What do you mean?
Which body would you choose to be transposed into?
What are you torturing? Is it just bodies in general?
So I'm torturing both of these creatures. The amount
the human and the fish. Is
yeah.
that where we're still at?
The human versus the fish.
Right.
I'm torturing either one of them. Whatever body you choose, which one would you choose to be tortured in?
Well, I wouldn't care.
Okay, why wouldn't you care?
Because my mental state is in either one of them.
No, but if it was going to be transposed into one of them.
Yeah. I would feel the same about it.
Okay, and if I were to say, I'll put you into the fish and torture you less than than the human. You can choose either the fish or the human, but I'm going to torture the fish less. Which one would you choose?
I guess the fish. Well, I don't know. Do I ever get to come back out?
No. After the torture, your life will end.
Okay, my life will end. Then I guess the fish.
Okay, and vice versa.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
I would choose. Oh, you mean like if you're going to torture the human less? Right. Yeah, I'm going to pick the human.
Okay, so what's the thing that you value?
Not being tortured.
Okay. All right.
For sure. That is the thing I value. Okay.
All right. So, and what's the torture coming from? What's the necessary requirement for torture?
Yeah, well, this is what we got back to on the YouTube thing, because you wanted one specific quality, and I said that didn't make any sense. There is no one specific thing that allows for torture.
Mm-hmm. But what is the experience that you're worried about within that situation?
The torture?
Yeah. So is it
what do you mean? What is the experience?
So yeah. So for me, that would be the
experience is the experience, is what you're saying, right? Like
as me as a conscious creature. So for me, when you're talking about torture, it's the negative experience as a conscious creature. And for you, I think it was the same, because the thing that you
well, that is one of the components that would have to be there.
Okay. If I said the fish has an extra gill, is that the thing that's going to make a difference for you?
No.
Okay. If I said the fish was almost human, it was a very human-esque fish, but it has gills, is that going to make a difference for you?
No.
Okay. So what's the thing that you value?
What the one thing that I value?
What's the relevant thing that you value? Is it the fact that the fish like human,
my mental state like going into one of them,
its neck, or is it the fact it's very human, or is it the shell, or is it the fact that it might be 6 foot or under 6 foot, or the color of the hair, or the amount of hair on its knuckles, or its the length of its toenails? What's the thing that you value within that situation?
Yeah, obviously all the relevant components of what torture would be.
Okay, so specifically, it's the negative experience on your consciousness, wouldn't it be?
So that certainly would be a part of it. But I mean, if we're talking about it in a materialistic sense, then just the fact that I'm made of matter, or the fact that I have nerves, and the fact that I can sit and think about the torture is also a huge problem about it. So there would be so many multiple facets.
Yeah, so that seems to be more of a descriptive thing that you're talking about in regards to the makeup of this creature. But the thing that actually matters, that thing that you're considering, is the experience that you would have if you were transposed into this body and were to experience this torture.
That is a thing I'm considering. I'm not telling you that.
Wouldn't it not be the? So I said again. So would it, if this thing had horns, but it was going to be tortured more or less? What's the thing that you're considering?
Okay, let me try to explain this. If something was sentient to you, and the only thing it was sentient about is a single dot of light, do you care if it's tortured?
Can it experience torture?
No. Well, I mean, if you're talking about pain, then no.
Okay, so can it, let me make it really simple. Can it experience a negative well-being? Okay.
Sure, let's say it doesn't like the dot of light being removed. It sets it to a value of +1, having that dot, and then not.
Okay, so the supposed torture that you're talking about, will it affect the well-being of this creature? Will cause a negative effect?
Well, I told you it assigns a value of +1 to the light dot and a value of -1 to not having the light dot.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. Sorry, I would say that would be a negative thing to do. Yeah, even if it has a very low level of consciousness.
Okay, but torturing it, like if we're talking about the physical component of stabbing it, really doesn't matter.
Why? So can you explain why it would matter?
Well, let's say it doesn't affect the dot of light by stabbing this fish.
Okay.
Then does it matter if you stab the fish?
If you stab the fish and it causes that action will cause negative well-being to this creature, then yeah. So if you stab it, but the result.
No, we just said it doesn't. It doesn't affect the dot of light, and that's the only part of it that's conscious.
Okay. Will it reduce the amount of time that it will experience this dot of light?
No, it'll heal.
Okay, so it will have no effect on its experience.
Right.
Yes?
So you can stab the fish. It would be fine.
Possibly, yeah.
All right. So when you're asking me what is the relevant factors of torture, there's a few of them. Conscious experience is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that stabbing means something to me is another one. The fact that I can think about it is another one.
Yep.
Right? They're all just aspects. So there's just no one aspect.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is just going to be the fact that it's a negative experience for you if you were transposed into those bodies. So
right, you're asking me what makes it negative, and it's the ability to make things negative. It's like it's a tautological statement.
No, but the fact that you can think about it, is that an additional negative experience for this creature?
Yeah, it would be.
So right? It's not just the fact that it is being tortured, but it's the fact that it can also think about the fact that it's going to be tortured more.
Yeah.
Okay, right? So what would be...
You're trying to ask me what makes a negative value, and it's the ability to make negative values.
No. That's not what I'm asking you. So let me put it this way, right? If I put someone into a cage, right, and I told them, hey, you're going to be in this cage for the rest of your life. It's not going to be long, and it's going to involve me doing horrible things to you. And then I say, I'm not going to do it right now, but I'm going to come back and do it. Later on, I come back and do it. Okay. Is it just the fact that I tortured them, that I literally physically pulled out the nails and all that? Is that alone the negative thing?
No.
Okay. So what else is there?
Just like the anticipation, the waiting for it.
Exactly. So what's the problem with the anticipation? Like, so you've got the anticipation, you've got the actual torture. What is all of that doing to the well-being of this creature?
Like, what is it doing? It's setting its negative values to come forth. Exactly.
So it actually causes a negative experience on the well-being of this conscious creature.
Right.
Exactly. So that's essentially what I'm saying.
No, I know that. That's why I said it's tautological. If you're asking me what makes a negative experience, it's the ability to make negative experiences. Like, we don't disagree with that. That's a very obvious statement.
No. Okay. What is it if I were to put someone through a slaughterhouse, a human being? What's the issue? So let's just go back to that.
Well, I want to ask you a question. If something was sentient and it only had the dot of light but did not assign values to it, is it okay to do whatever you want?
As in, it experiences well-being, but it can't conceptualize that to a greater degree, or what?
No, it just doesn't care whether or not it has that speck of light.
So I wouldn't, no.
You wouldn't stab it?
No.
Why?
So the fact that it can have a conscious experience is something that I value.
Okay, so this is just tautologically, that's what you care about, and that's that. Even if it's not negative or positive.
No, so deontologically, I would still value it. let alone, okay, so let me put it this way. So the thing that I sort of adhere to is this sort of threshold deontology. So
I know what it is.
Sorry?
I know what it is.
Yeah, so the fact alone that an act may not just have a negative experience or a negative utility attached to it doesn't mean that I would view it as negative.
Okay, fine. That's fine. Like, yeah. I don't mind that answer, but it's just the fact that when you ask me what was negative about being tortured, I'm saying it's the fact that I can make it negative. It's the ability that I have to see things as negative.
No, but even if your consciousness was reduced to that level, that torture that you experience, you would understand that is a bad thing.
No, I wouldn't. If I can't assign negative or positive values to things, I could not think of something as a bad thing.
I'm sorry. No. I'm saying this. When I'm saying torture, I mean it experiences that thing.
Yeah, I understand that, but not just experiencing it. It's also assigning the fact that it's bad. You have to consider it bad for it to be bad.
Okay, if it experiences and it would view it as bad, you would view it as an immoral thing to do.
No, not necessarily. But if you were asking me if I was going to be tortured, what makes it bad for me? It's the fact that I can think of it as bad.
Okay, for another creature though.
For another, I would assume they work the exact same way.
Consciousness.
For
a creature of lower level of consciousness.
What about it? Like, it would be the same thing.
So would it be bad or would it not be bad if it had a lower level of consciousness than you?
In my view or in the animal's view, are you asking?
So in your view, would it be bad to torture something that has a lower level of consciousness than you?
I don't think it's just lower level of conscious. No, it's not a relative thing. Okay.
So, I mean, we can just get back to the same basic question, which is still, what's the difference between humans and animals that makes it okay to just kill one but not the other? So how about we just go back to that and see where you go from there? Because you just go down really strange. It's a lot of non-answers. Like, I don't want to be...
Well, if you feel like I'm not explaining something, you give me a direct question or an answer that you want, because I feel I've answered all your questions.
Okay. So what is it that you value about humans that makes makes it unethical to hurt them?
An absolute multitude of things.
Okay. Why don't you run through some of them? So we've already got consciousness. We've already got
the shell is enough.
Yeah.
The shell is enough. Then you have just the general intelligence. I love people's creativity. I love the way that, people make me feel, and I'm building societies with them.
So all of these things that you add on, I'm going to take a hypothetical human being and just lower them to, so you've got an animal, I'm just going to lower them to the level of an animal. So if you talk about their ability to build a building or appreciate...
Yeah. I understand that. You want to strip everything, but you want to strip it to the shell because you already know the shell's good enough.
Is it?
I told you, yes. Yes, it is. The shell has value.
Okay. If I drew a direct line from the human to the fish and I slightly changed the human being so that it's no longer a human being, would it now be less valuable?
I would have to know how much you slide it, because to me that would be very hard, and I can only tell you if I was looking at it.
Genetically no longer a human being, right? So let's just say, it's no longer a human being, then either it does or it doesn't have value. Because if you're saying it's only the fact that it has the shell of a human being that you value it.
Right. And I'm sure there are definitely like closenesses to that shell.
Yeah. So you would view something that's close to the shell as having value, but something that has slightly less similarity as having no value.
I wouldn't say no value, but what are you talking about slightly less?
So we've got the fish that or let's just say some animal like
So let's say I know fish is far enough. I say I do know human is close enough. And then you're saying there's this spectrum in between, and you're asking where the heck on this spectrum is your opinion?
Yeah.
Right. I wouldn't know. I mean, you could continuously paint pictures and then I can tell you.
Okay, so so we could just have a fish type human being that's exactly the same in every other comparable way, but the only difference is that one might have gills or might not have gills, and then that will be the thing that you value.
So, okay, what do we have? We have a shell of a human with gills.
Is this really the thing that you value? Like one has gills and the other one doesn't have gills, and now you say we can stab one but not the other?
No, I never said that. But I told you, if I have to save between the fish and the human that are otherwise completely identical, I just pick the human. And there is nothing else other than the fact that it's human for me to differentiate that decision. So obviously just being human carries some degree of value to me.
Yeah. And so then if we had something that had slightly less physical similarities to being a human than the actual human, you would immediately say it has no value.
No, I wouldn't say it immediately. It would be like a grayscale.
Okay, so if we had something that was, say, 50% fish, 50% human being, you would say what?
I would really have to know what the hell that looks like.
Okay, do you really need to know what that looks like, given that every other thing about this creature is exactly the same? Like, how do you think that
this... because I have empathetic responses to these sort of things. I mean,
how would you, like, if I just said I'm black, right? And I said I immediately view black people as being more valuable than white people. Right. How would you respond to that with me? How would you respond to that and say that I'm not being a racist?
I wouldn't say you weren't being racist, but I would just disagree with you.
Okay, but would you view that as being a little bit absurd? Like if I said black people have value, and
what do you mean by absurd? Like, give me what you're saying. Absurd means.
Would you view it within your perspective as being absurd?
Like, how do I feel? Do I feel like it's a negative thing that they do this?
It's really not. Like, I'm not trying to be super clever or trying to trick you.
No, I know that, but like, I need to understand, because I know from your server, when you guys talk about things like absurdity, you're talking about its view in the general public or the consensus.
No. What I mean is, so would you view this person or that specific view that they have as being batshit crazy? That'd be the way I'd put it.
I mean, I would say that to any racist.
Okay. Now, if they said black people have value, but white people don't have value, right? And they said, but somebody that's slightly less white has more value, would you say that person has a good set of moral values that you think that you would like to follow? Or would you say that seems fucking crazy?
I would say that I don't align with them. It's not like I think they're crazy. I don't think this is not how values can't work. I wouldn't say, I'm sorry, but your value system just doesn't work. I deny the fact that you do this. No, I would just say I disagree.
I'm not saying that they deny that they do this, but I'm saying, but you would view them as an immoral person in reflection to your own morals.
Sure.
Okay. So if they said, using your own sort of method, if they said, well, if a white person has slightly more melanin, just minimally more, then they immediately have more value, would you say, oh, well, that seems fair?
What do you mean fair? You mean it just means I disagree. There is no fairness.
There is no fair. Okay, but would you say that person has a shallow, shitty set of morals?
They're all shallow, all of them.
Okay, so just putting this back, so do you think that someone who says black people have more value than white people due to the fact that they're black, would you say that is a shitty person? Would you say a racist is a shitty person and has a shitty set of morals, specifically in regards to their racism?
I would say that it doesn't align with my morals.
Okay, would you just say that racist, people who value other human beings just on their race, are shitty people or not?
I guess.
You guess, or you don't know, or?
Like, I can tell you that I just morally disagree with them. I don't understand if you're trying, because when you say that, it sounds like you're appealing to an objective thing, and I know you're not going to say that you are. It just sounds like you are.
Yeah. So for me, Yeah. So for me, I would view that as pretty repulsive and repugnant. And
so would I.
I
So
would
what's
tell
the
them
point?
that's pretty fucking disgusting. And it
Okay.
essentially maps out to this fish to human line that you draw, and this sort of fish human hybrid where you say, well, this human or this sort of hybrid has slightly less fish characteristics, and everything else is the same. Everything's exactly the same.
Right.
But now it has value, and whereas before it didn't have value. So
Yeah, I understand that it's using the
the
same line.
lifespan is the same. The consciousness is the same. If you tortured them, it'd be the same. Just for the sake of the argument, we can go into the sort of magical fish realm if you want. So if you had instead of a fish, let's just say we scale up for practicality's sake, a chimp. Let's just say we have a chimp who's smart enough to be a professor or an accountant. Okay?
Well, then it would automatically have value in my system.
Okay, but would it have the same value as a human?
If I had to choose like some sort of trolley problem thing, it would probably lose by some amount, but not by a huge amount.
Yeah.
Because more of it's invested on the fact that it's a professor.
Okay, so what I'm going to say is you would value the chimp less. So let's just say a very intelligent chimp.
I'm not sure, actually. To be honest, when you ask that question, it seems more like there would just be a tipping point where it's equal. Like if you've gained enough value, then I would see the species drop off. If that makes sense. Like it would have its own curve to it.
Okay, so the species, the shell, is still something of value for you. Yeah. But if it becomes intelligent enough, then you would think that it suddenly becomes more valuable.
Yeah, it would kind of drop off.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, that draws a direct line to racism. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you do think it draws a line to racism, but it doesn't.
Okay. So just for the sake of the argument, if you had, say, a chimp who was applying for a job and everything else is the same, so it's perfectly qualified, it comes with glowing recommendations, it has an expected lifespan in the job that's equivalent to a human being.
Yeah. You're asking me which one would I hire?
Yeah.
I don't care. It's a 50-50 split.
So how does this only become a 50-50 split then?
Because I'm hiring for a job.
Yeah. But if I said I'm not hiring for a job because the chimp is a chimp, then what then? Because you're being inconsistent here a bit.
How am I being inconsistent?
If I said to you, I'm going to hire a black person because a black person has the right shell, and doesn't have the right shell, even though they're exactly the same in every measurable way, then how would you view that?
I would think that's racist.
You would?
Yeah.
Wow. So why would you view that as racist?
Because you would be judging based on race.
And what's the race? So what's the race argument? Well, what's the issue with the race?
It's that I just disagree with it.
No, it's a shell argument.
No, it's not because it's a shell argument. It's because it's a race argument.
So what is a race? So what actually is a race? Is it not the skin that you wear?
Partially.
Okay, so if I said for you, like, let's put it this way, if I said it's worse when black women get beaten than when white women get beaten, even though the experience is exactly the same, is it not the skin that matters? That is not the skin that I'm arguing about.
No, I get what you're saying about the shell argument.
Then why you would?
And I'm saying there are shells that I don't care about, and there are ones that I do.
Okay, then. All right. So if we followed your system and we mapped it out consistently,
you mean the way people currently do?
That, for me, rolls out into racism.
Well, it doesn't, because I'm telling you which shells I make distinctions between and which ones I don't.
Except
so
consistent
within my system, I don't make a distinction based off of race shells, then how can it lead to racism?
Yeah, so if you're being consistent with it, because I already said to you just before, if I had a chimp if I had an option between a chimp to hire, or a black person to hire, and I said I'm going to hire the black person, you would say that I was being racist. I mean, it's technically a speciesist, but would you accept that as being moral within your system or within your view?
You already know the answer to that. But you're trying to say I'm being inconsistent with a shell argument. But I never said that because it's a shell argument, that's why it's bad. So there's nothing to be inconsistent to unless I make that universal statement.
Yeah, I mean,
if I make distinctions and I consistently stick to the distinctions that I've made, then I'm being consistent.
Yes, but you've already stated that a shell is valuable to you. You already stated earlier that a shell is something
specific distinctions of shells are valuable to me and other ones are not. And I'm consistent with the distinctions that I have made.
Yeah, okay. So if you had, okay, so that's fine. For me, that just, maps out to racism. The way
I mean, you can say that, but if you're saying that racism is literally judging by race and I don't do that, then I don't see how you can understand it as racism.
Yeah, so no, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying it, I understand it as racism. I'm saying if you follow the shell argument consistently and view it and take it to its ends, to its...
But I don't. You already know I don't follow the shell argument consistently. Because I don't make a universal statement about shells.
Why not, though?
Because I don't want to. That's not part of my value set.
Okay, but if you...
Why do I have to?
Yeah. Cool, that's fine. So the thing that, so let's just put it down.
I mean, you're saying that's fine, but I don't know if you're really understanding what I'm saying.
No, I'm understanding what you're saying. I'm just saying it comes off as unbelievably absurd to me.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would assume you already think I'm absurd to your moral system since I eat animals. Like I would expect that's the beginning of the argument.
No, I mean, I don't necessarily automatically assume that. I'll ask people things. I'll ask them why they do it. But essentially, once you say that you're happy to adhere to a shell argument, that you would automatically say something like a severely demented human being who has all other traits equalized to, say, something like a chicken. Do you eat pigs or anything like that?
Yeah, I eat pigs.
Okay, so pigs have the intelligence level of something like a 4-year-old. So if we had a human being who had the intelligence level...
I don't know if I agree with a 4-year-old, but sure. I do think pigs are smarter than most animals.
Yeah, so pigs are probably... There's definitely pigs that are smarter and have more complex lives than human beings. So if we just took a pig, which might have a lifespan of 15 to 20 years, has a high level of experience, and we took someone who would be...
Like, I'm not going to give you that point that it does have experience, but if you want to say for the sake of the argument, it does.
Pig has experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to go into phenomenological consciousness, we can go into that.
Yeah, okay. And for the sake of the argument, if we had someone who had lesser consciousness than a pig, you would say that it would be unethical to eat this human being, but it would be ethical to kill and eat this pig. And it would boil down to a shell argument.
The shell would be one of the components of things that I value, yes.
Yeah. So
if the pig didn't hit one of the other things that I value, if it's just not on the list of anything I value, then yes, it would be okay.
Okay, so for me, I'd be off board with that because that.
Well, again, I'm not saying you got to be on board with it. I mean, I even told you this, that I made a poll on Reddit and vegans were 50-50 split on whether they would save the human or the fish. Do you think every single person who said human is also absurd?
Yeah, I'm not really fussed about that. I mean, sometimes a lot of people just haven't thought about it, and I'm happy to talk to other people about it. There's a lot of vegans, I agree, that would adhere to a shell argument, but once they think about it a bit more.
So that's what I want to know. Would you think that someone who sets the level of sentient and they think all animals are sentient and they give all of them moral consideration, but they also have a slight value for plus humans, that they're just being absurd?
I would view that as a pointless value to have, yeah.
I don't understand what you mean by pointless value. They're all pointless.
Okay, so I would say that basically I just view it as a shit value to have. So you can have a value.
You can disagree with them. Okay, so you disagree with me.
Let me put it this way. If somebody said, I value human beings who wear hats more, and I say, and I think that people who wear hats deserve far less to be assassinated or to be tortured or to be murdered or whatever else, then I would think that's fucking insane, yeah.
Yeah, I get that. you disagree with them. I understand that. I would disagree with them too. It's not a part of my value set.
Yeah. And so I
So
guess
what do you want to do with that?
Yeah, I guess at this point, what we'd say is that really what it boils down to is if everything is equalized for you, it just gets down to the shell argument. So,
what you mean if everything goes down to just the shell, then the shell matters? Yes, then yes.
Okay, so at one point, if one of these creatures has a tiny little tail, that's the difference between whether it gets shot bolt gunned in the head versus it doesn't get bolt gunned in the head.
Why is that the only consideration?
So everything else, so we've equalized everything. Okay, just pay attention for a sec. We draw a direct line between the pig and the human being. Okay, because you're saying because the fact it's a human being, you give it value, and so it's not okay to do it to the human being. The pig, which is equivalent in every way,
right.
But except for the shell, is not worthy of that consideration. And so we draw a direct line, okay? And we start making slight changes away from the human being.
Yeah.
And then at some point, it's going to be some minor point, some minor change. Either the ears go up to the top of the head instead of maybe to the side, or it'll be something like the hair is a bit shorter.
Yeah, I know. I understand the question. And
yes.
I told you it's a grayscale, and I would only have to be able to know if I saw it.
Yeah, so the natural thing is that eventually Shadow Starshine would get to a point where you would have two different models of a creature, and one of them might have, let's say, slightly less hair and a tail, whereas the other one has a bit more human type hair, so hair maybe at the top of the head or whatever, and not a tail. And that would be the point at which Shadow Starshine says, it's now ethical to bolt gun this thing in the head.
No, I mean, I don't know how much it's going to take, but at some point, yes, it would be different enough.
Yeah. So it'll be some pissy little physical difference, and that's what your ethics boil down to, or your value of these creatures. Because once everything else is equalized, we've already
because it already has nothing else that I value.
Physical difference. Yeah. So that's pretty disgusting for me.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's why I think it boils down to what would it be equivalent to racism? Because
I mean, you keep saying that. You think it boils down to racism.
No. I mean, if you follow it consistently, it would essentially.
No, it doesn't. There's nothing consistent unless you take a universal value of shell arguments.
Yeah.
Unless you do that, and I don't do that, so it would be inconsistent for you because you think all shell arguments are bad, and then therefore, if you use the shell argument, it would be inconsistent. But since I never said that, then I have nothing to be inconsistent to.
Okay. But it would boil down to the difference between maybe like a tail and hair in the wrong place.
I mean, it's going to be a big enough change, right? Obviously, you're not going to take a human, add a small nub to it, and I'm going to be like, well, that's good enough.
Yeah. So we just progressively change it, but then it will eventually boil down to something like a tail.
It's going to go down to a point where it's like grayish, and then I'm like, I'm not sure how I feel about this. And then it's going to go farther. And once it's hit far enough, I'll be like, yeah, okay, I think I'm fine with this now. Which is like the point of a pig or the point of a fish.
Yeah.
Like I already know that that's far enough away. And I already know where close enough is. And there's going to be a gray, like, I'm just not sure how I feel about this area.
Okay. But within the gray zone, you'd probably, it's still then going to boil down to something like a tail. So, yeah.
Now, a tail. Well, it might be something like a tail, sure.
Yeah. So for me, that's fucking insane. That's insane, dude. The moment you say that something does and doesn't have a value, goes down to this thing has a tail. That's when you think it's okay to bolt gun something in the head.
Right.
Yeah, that's.
I get that you think it's insane, but what do you want to do from there?
No, that I'm expressing that to you, okay? Because obviously,
okay. Well, I would like to also express to you that if you chose the fish over the human, you seem insane to me, and I think you would seem insane to most people.
And I'm happy to argue that's, I guess, why we're having this discussion. Your ethics boil down to tail, whereas my ethics is what is the experience of that thing, okay? And why are we doing that?
Well, no, my ethics does not boil down to tail because there are a multitude of values.
It boils down to tail.
You've already stripped, in this hypothetical, everything that I value. so that only the shells can be compared.
We've
But that does not mean,
yeah.
hold on, that does not mean that those are the only things that I value.
That's the thing it boils down to. That's
no, it does not boil down to anything. It boils down to the fact that if it doesn't have any value except for the one you want me to consider, then I have to only consider that one.
Yeah. So once you equalize everything, that's literally what boils down to. I've said,
okay.
And you said the difference between having moral consideration and not having moral consideration is probably going to be something like it has a tail or it doesn't.
If we take two pigs and we start scaling one of them up into a point where it's self-aware, I'm going to value that pig. So does it all boil down to self-awareness?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So what are you saying? It all boils down to everything I value.
Okay, let me put it this way, all right? So if you scaled up two pigs equally, okay, and then you said the only thing we change between the two after that is one of them has a tail, the other one has a tail. The point where you say that one of them is more valuable is the fact that one of them doesn't have a tail. That's what it boils down to.
What, two pigs? What
So
do you mean?
Take two pigs, just listen, okay? If you have two pigs and you scale them up in consciousness, right? You put in a shell argument, okay? So you say you value a shell argument. Now, if we just increase the self-awareness of both of them, and you say that they both currently have the same value, I agree with that. I understand that, okay. But then but you've also got a value for the shell, which means if we remove the tail of one of these pigs, okay, genetically remove the tail, then you immediately say that the pig that doesn't have the tail immediately has more moral value. That's what I mean. It boils down to that.
Well, I mean, a pig with a tail and a pig without a tail is just not, they're both far enough where I don't care. Like, that doesn't make any significant difference to me. And if you already said that you scaled them up to self-aware, then they both have value. Like, it doesn't matter how much you change the shell anymore. They've already got value.
So humans have value regardless of any other factor, but animals don't have value until you scale everything else up because of their shell.
Yes, that's the point. If you're not on the list of things that I value.
That goes back to tail, dude.
Do you not understand why it boils down to every single value I have?
Yeah, so
it doesn't boil down to one value. It boils down to all the different values I have.
But if I equalize everything, what then?
Sorry, what?
If I equalize everything else, so if I equalize self-awareness and consciousness level and whatever else, it will then eventually boil down to shell.
Equalize between what? Like, where are they equal? Are they both self-aware?
They're both equal, so they're both border, okay? So if we're comparing a human and an animal, right? If everything else is equal, that you
equal in which direction?
Whatever direction.
It does matter the direction, because if you've equalized a pig up to a human in every single way, it already has value and the shell doesn't matter.
Okay.
Do you understand this point?
Yeah, and if we equalize it down,
yes.
Yeah.
And if you equalize it to remove every single other value that I hold until only the shell can be considered, then the shell matters.
Okay. And then it becomes tail, so we go back to tail.
Right. So, but only in this hypothetical. Do you understand that?
Man, you've been doing philosophy and debating enough to not be to not say, well, only in this hypothetical. What this essentially means, this hypothetical, is that the thing that you value will be something as small as a tail. That will be the thing where a creature is okay to bolt gun in the head.
I don't know if it is entirely just a tail, but we are saying that a certain level of shell, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I understand that you want to put tail as a dramatic effect to make it seem simplistic, but I have absolutely no idea to what aspect of a shell change it would take.
So it might be something like a tail, and then the ears are slightly different, and there's no hair on the top of the head.
Like, I could see a very, very fucked up human and being like, that's still a human.
Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the linear difference. in physical appearances. So the shell. So if I put 0 being a pig and 100 being the human, and 99, you might say no, unethical. 98, unethical. 90, unethical. Then we'll get to 50, and you'll see gray area. And then at some point, you'll get to 40, and the only difference between 40 and 41, where we're bulk gunning something in the head, is going to be something minor.
Yeah, I would say I'm no longer having an empathetic reaction.
Yeah, so that at that point, and you're saying that it has no moral value, or there's no reason for you to value it morally, and it's now okay to bulk gun in the head. And
assuming
at that point, when the
assuming it has no other values.
Yeah, so assuming we reduce the values of this creature to the point that you think, to the point where it's basically equalized. At that point, we've reduced it, and the physical changes have been different enough that at some point, the only thing that you're going to be saying, well, it's now valuable at 41, but at 40, it's now lost a tail. So now we can bolt gun in the head. That's what I mean.
All I want you to say is that, yes, I do have a shell argument. That is a part of my values. But I also want you to say, I have other values which are considerable, so that it doesn't all boil down to one of the values I have.
Yeah. So this is what I'm saying is, yes, you have other values, but the moment that you equalize all of those, okay, then it
downwards.
Does it boil down to something as small as, will it boil down to something as a tail or ear shape or hair or
I don't see how this is like so complicated for you. You're saying if we remove everything I care about until I only care about one thing, would it be the only one thing I care about? Well, obviously, that's how the argument would work.
No. So what I'm saying is, once you boil it down, the thing that it suddenly becomes unethical versus ethical is something that is a physical change, a very minor physical change.
Yeah, when that's the only thing I can consider, then that's the only thing that's considerable.
Okay, so for me, that's an incredibly shallow consideration.
Okay, that's fine. I don't mind the fact that you disagree with it. And I understand that a lot of people would disagree with you for saying the fish and the human are a coin flip, all else equal.
Yeah, and I'm happy to explain that, but I just want you to just say to everyone that something as minor as a tail could be the difference between something getting bulk gun in the head and not getting bulk.
I have no idea what the shell difference would be. So I'm not going to say a tail because I don't know.
Yeah, it could very realistically just be that version A or hybrid A versus hybrid B, the point where you decide it's okay to bulk gun in the head, it could be something as small as a tail.
Yeah, whatever that difference is.
Yeah, it could be something as small as it has a tail. Now it's okay to bulk gun in the head.
I don't know if it's as small as a tail. I don't know why you want to put that in there. I have no idea what the difference is. Can you just stick to that?
It could be a tail. It could be
ears. It could be a tail. It could be a bunch of.
That's all I wanted. I just wanted you to say that it could be the difference that you give, or the thing that it now causes it to not have moral value, is that it has a tail or it doesn't have a tail.
Yes. When nothing else is considerable.
Yeah,
okay, that's fine. But I don't know if it's a tail. The fact that it could be a tail, I mean, it probably isn't a tail, because when I picture a human with a tail, that doesn't seem far enough away from me. But whatever the difference is in the shell, there exists a difference. And at that level, it would be fine if I have nothing else to consider. I don't know what you think this proves.
No, I'm just saying that I just wanted everyone to understand that eventually your moral consideration will boil down to something as silly as a tail. Could boil down
is such a stupid way of phrasing it.
That's literally what we're doing, mate. That's what we're doing.
No, it says when you boil down everything to one thing, then that's what it boils down to. It's not just the fact that it boils down to it. It's the fact that you boiled it down to it in a hypothetical.
Why are you worried about it being why are you making this it's a hypothetical argument?
Because the fact that if we go with a hypothetical of two pigs and I start scaling up self-awareness to a point where I say that's considerable, then it all boils down. Saying something like then it all boils down to self-awareness would just be a stupid way of phrasing it. No, that just means in this particular hypothetical, it's the only thing I have to consider.
No. So if you said if you brought it up to the pig up to a level of what, a human being, the self-awareness?
Yeah.
Would you give it the same level of consideration as a human being?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so when they're brought up to that level, the shell argument is irrelevant. But when a human being is brought down to the level of a pig, then the shell argument is relevant.
Correct.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm happy with that. We can leave it at there. And for me, that's what I'm saying is it boils down to the tail. So yeah, I'm happy with that, man.
Well, I don't know what you mean by you're happy with that. You're just saying you disagree with it. That's fine. I don't mind if you disagree with it. I didn't expect you to start agreeing with me at the beginning of this because you're a vegan and I'm not a vegan. We already know there's differences between us.
Yeah. But your morality can be boiled down to a tail.
Yeah, well, that's just a stupid phrasing. My morality can be boiled down to self-awareness. My morality can be boiled down to a lot of different things.
Yeah. Do you think people...
Are you willing to say that to me? Are you willing to say it boils down to the one aspect we're considering?
Yeah, so we're just going around in circles, but
I want you to agree or disagree with that point. Any of my values can be boiled down to that one value if it's the only value I have to consider.
Yeah, I mean, if everything is equalized, that literally means it's boiled down to something. And if you don't treat it equally, then that means you're saying that the things that you value have been removed. But you're saying you're treating one differently from the other, which means the thing that it does boil down to is something as little as a tail. We've gone over this.
It's one of the things that it can be boiled down to. It is one of the things.
Yep, and all of the other things
disagree with that.
I've removed all the other things. That's the point of it. So it's...
I know, but that's the point, is that you've removed the other things. You have to contextualize this hypothetical in the fact that you've removed everything. That doesn't mean all those other things don't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that you don't have other values.
Great.
The difference between you saying it's okay to bolt gun a pig in the head versus a severely retarded human being...
When I have nothing else to consider is...
Yeah, okay, so let's all right, I'm going to make it really clear, okay? So the difference that Shadow Starshine cares about, okay, between bolt gunning a pig versus a similar human being or a human being that can be equalized in terms of things like consciousness, it eventually just boils down to
No, incorrect wording. When I have nothing else to consider, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear you put that into the sentence. When I have nothing else to consider but the shell, then it boils down to the shell.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy with that. Yeah. So when everything is equalized between, say, something like a pig...
No, not when everything's equalized, because you can scale it up. So you have to say you've removed all my other values.
Okay, so if I said if a human being was scaled down to the level of a pig, are you happy with that so far?
Sure.
And that's in relation to all of the other things that Shadow Starshine considers to be valuable. The difference between a pig being okay to be bolt gunned in the head versus a human being bolt gunned in the head is a shell argument. And if you explore that further, it could be just that one... the thing that it could boil down to is something as simple as the creature has a tail or it does not have a tail.
Probably isn't that small, but yes, it will be something like that.
Okay, that's fine. All right, cool. Is there anything else you want to talk about, or are you happy with that?
I don't know. Are you a proponent that do you find anything inconsistent about my position?
No, I find it consistent. I agree that it's consistent. I just find it crazy.
You just don't like it. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you wouldn't be one of those people who say that all other positions are inconsistent.
What? No. What?
No, I've heard some people say that,
all other non-vegan positions are inconsistent.
Yeah,
that's just stupid. No, okay. You could make a consistent position for something like murder. Like I could just say the only axiom I hold is murder, and everything that I consider is based on my axiom for murder. So I run this through with people and just say, yeah, you can have a perfectly consistent position. It just might result in batshit crazy conclusions.
So now I get the point that you disagree with me. And I didn't expect that to go any differently. But do you think there is anything more fundamentally wrong other than the fact that it's an arbitrary value that I hold that you don't like?
Yeah, it's not so much obviously, I think I've heard someone say all values are arbitrary, and that's what grounding is. There's a grounding problem. You do hold an axiom for something. But in comparison to that, for me versus you, if your moral value, when scaled down and everything else is equalized and all of that, if it boils down to something that's a small physical manifestation, yeah, for me that's pretty shallow.
No, I get that you feel that way. I'm just curious if you think there's anything more to say on the topic other than, you're expressing your dislike for it.
No, I think for the most part, I've seen some of your stuff, and I think I've read some of your other stuff. So I think a lot of the other outlooks that we have are pretty similar. So I agree with you in that morality is essentially like mind dependent. Is that something you'd agree with?
I think the whole mind dependent, mind independent thing is a very shallow way of looking at objective and subjective morality, because there are a lot of objectivists who will tell you it's mind dependent, but that's not what they mean by moral objectivity.
Okay. I mean, that's probably something I have to look more into in terms of the nuances of that. But yeah, I think a lot of the other things that you and I consider are pretty similar. So it's probably not much else that I would disagree with you on.
Okay. That's just a weird kind of ending point. It's just like, I understand that we just have a disagreement. You don't like my agreement. It leads to a situation where, I'm eating animals and that just bothers you. We could talk about philosophy of the mind, why I think things are phenomenally conscious or not, in case you wanted to go into that. But I don't know how much you've read on the topic. I was reading listening to one of your other debates where you were quoting the Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness, and I don't know if you stick to that as meaning phenomenological now or not. Not because I showed you there's different ways of classifying it, so I don't know what you think that declaration means anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I've read some of the stuff that you've put out, so I'd still agree to what has been. I still agree with the Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness in that animals have consciousness. I would probably do a bit more reading in terms of maybe a few different what the sort of differences are within those two. So
you would want to know whether or not they are actually declaring phenomenological consciousness or not. Like that would seem important to you because you care about something's experience of things just outright. Like that's just your whole line whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things again that I consider to be valid. But yeah, it is the experience of something is something I consider. But as
it is one of my values too. It's just
as the thing that's been one of the things that's been quoted. I think access consciousness occurs in things that are less than 18 months old versus is a phenomenological is in the one that's is in humans that are 18 months and older. But even if I were to, I would think it would be unethical to kill human beings who have consciousness level of a 1-year-old if they just stayed at the level of a 1-year-old. So that wouldn't necessarily change because I would say a lot of animals. It would.
So let's say, we might agree here that access consciousness does not mean a subjective experience of something. So let's say a baby doesn't have that. Pre-18. Would if you found out that there was nothing subjective going on, would you still be okay with murdering it?
No, I mean I'd have to look into more about it because I'm not necessarily sure I agree with it immediately. I've read it and Well,
you don't have to. Well, okay, just for the sake of argument, you could just accept it. Maybe you would, end up later disagreeing with the fact, but you would still say even if it didn't, you still wouldn't want to murder it. I'm just curious what value you would look towards.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it in a way, I guess, that simplifies it. So if it was something like a philosophical zombie, then I don't see any problem with it.
Okay.
Does that clarify it for you, or?
Yeah. I guess so. All right. I don't think I could do it, but
it's because my understanding of a philosophical zombie is that I guess there's literally nothing going. So I'll.
I mean, there's not nothing going on there. Obviously, there's something going on. We just don't call it phenomenological.
Yeah.
Whatever that going on is.
Yeah. So if you were, I don't know if this is what you're asking me, but essentially, if it was something like a droid that had very human-esque, that was programmed to have human-esque reactions and stuff like that, but if someone could guarantee that essentially nothing was going on, and I'm just having a biological reaction to seeing a droid that has very human-esque reactions, then I wouldn't consider that to be morally wrong. If that makes it clearer.
It does.
Yeah. So, but if there's something going on and that it causes a negative experience on that something, then I would still be adverse to that.
Okay. So it's got to at least get to that level for you.
It's if there's something, then I consider it. If it makes it simpler, I would give value to a human being I think I've already said this anyway, but that's got the consciousness level of a 1-year-old who obviously is still access, and I wouldn't I'd consider an animal with that same level to have value. But if it was something like a droid that has human-esque reactions and features, but it's just...
I want to make sure I heard that right, because you said a human with access conscious only, no subjective experience, you would give value. But an animal,
I would give consideration. Like I wouldn't be okay murdering a human being who has the consciousness level of a 1-year-old. And
right. But I'm asking if that 1-year-old meant no subjective experience. Even that.
Yeah, this is where I'm a bit. Like I don't want to answer it until I've looked into it a bit more, because it does just sort of it's not something that I necessarily agree with. So I'm not going to jump on board with that.
Right. Like a lot of my arguments, and we didn't really even get into this, is based off of subjective experience, right? Like I care a lot about a subjective experience, but me and you have different scientific understandings of that. But when you push me to the point where it's like I have to unvalue that, or that's not even a part of the consideration, I realize that I still have values.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to like the shell argument. It's like, well, I realize that I still care, even though there is no subjectivity going on there.
Yeah. And yeah, so I mean,
like maybe you throw the dead body out with the trash. I don't.
No. I mean, like I understand that there's there's like extrinsic value and stuff like that, and I'm not like I'm being black and white, but I wouldn't look at a dead body and just be like, fuck that guy, sort of thing. Like,
but I would throw a dead fish in the trash. Would you?
I would give, if it was. I mean, let me put it this way: like if we were in a at the moment, yes, because a fish doesn't really there's no like family or anything to grieve over it.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll strip that context then. There's no family to grieve over the human. You throw it in the trash.
I mean, if I wouldn't necessarily do that. Yeah. I mean, I guess it does get down to a bit of like, I guess, how would I put it? It brings a lot of extrinsic value. I'll just simplify it so that you can understand it. And I'll like if I.
Well, you know, my shell argument is extrinsic.
No.
Because we've already defined intrinsic as something that gives value to itself. And I'm not saying a shell can do that.
Yeah. So let me just use a hypothetical which sort of strips away all of my concerns. So if we were in like some end of the world situation where it was like me just walking the world by myself, and it was just some fucking, you had one dead body of a human being versus there's just bodies everywhere, and there was a human being versus a fish. Like I probably wouldn't give a shit about a human being body that is a stranger versus, a fish or a dog that I never met or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think, and I think a lot of people would be the same. Like if it was just you, and if it was just some random human being,
I would agree that if we're in this post-apocalyptic setting, that we have things that are a little more pressing on our minds. Other than
even if
what the hell to do.
Even if hypothetically I had like nothing better to do, I wouldn't necessarily give it more consideration than a fish or a dog or whatever.
Well, I mean, I would look at the human body as like what it once was, and how much that means to me. So I would feel differently about it than when I sit there and ponder the fish's life.
Yeah, I mean, if it was, I guess you would think about it in terms of the experience that the human being might have had, but it boils down to your reflection of that thing, I guess.
Well, sure, right, because it's not currently having an experience. That's obviously not something I'm currently caring about. But but it's me. It's like my extrinsic value of what was.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I can. Right. Yeah, I can accept that. Yeah.
And I'm just curious, like, what would be the difference to you between the human and the fish if you would make the same sort of considerations?
Yeah, I mean, if it like, I would probably naturally feel probably a bit more sad for the human being like that, but I guess I wouldn't necessarily. It would probably be more of an intuition thing than I guess something that I could say that the human body has more value than the fish body. Like at the end of it all, they're just both dead bodies within that situation. Yeah.
And also, like, what about a scenario where, like, you have to stab one or the other, and all else was equal except one you had to stab a human body until it died, or one you had to stab a fish until it died? Did you just feel the same about it, no matter what you have to do?
Yeah, I'd feel shit about both of that.
Well, of course you feel shit about both. I'm just wondering if it's equal.
I would feel, probably. I would think if everything's literally equalized, then I'd probably feel the same.
Yeah, I would have a much bigger empathetic reaction to the human.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so let me put it this way. I would possibly have more empathetic reaction towards a human, but I wouldn't necessarily say it would be less or more ethical, I guess would be one way to put it. If that makes sense. Well, I would feel maybe intrinsic or not intuitively worse about the human, but it probably wouldn't, in terms of ethically, I probably wouldn't say there's much of a difference or any.
Like, I might get to the same point when we're talking about just shells, right? Like, I'm not going to say that the value is so high from just having the shell. It's only a certain amount, but that certain amount reflects my empathetic reaction towards it. And it reflects, what I think is humanity's empathetic reaction to it, where we're built in to keep each other safe, and we have these feelings built into us. I don't know, maybe you've gotten to the point where you're just over that. It just doesn't matter to you anymore. But I wouldn't be able to do that.
No, I mean,
like, I agree, like, a huge part of morality is in subjectivity. And I think that if we were to start this conversation over and say, hey, what's the biggest chunk of your values? Then I would say, well, here's my ideas on phenomenological consciousness, and here's why I set the line. But I mean, you were looking towards all my values, and I wanted to express the fact that they're more encompassing. There's no one single thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have another talk with you another time. It's just I guess it was a bit busy, and I just wanted to get you in as soon as I could. But I'm happy to have you back on, and we could probably have a bit more of a chill chat. And I'm just happy to just explore. And I think there's a lot of things I could probably learn from you from a different perspective. So I'm happy to talk to you again.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we got a bit heated in the middle there, but it's all good.
Yeah.
So yeah, sure. You can hit me up, and we can have a debate anytime you want.
All right, no problem. Thanks, man.
All right, I'll see you later.
Yeah, stop the broadcast. All right, see you. Bye.